A knitter notices that one sleeve is slightly longer than the other. Immediately questions start forming. Did the gauge change? Was I using the wrong needle size? Did one sleeve spend more time hanging before blocking? Was the yarn from a different dye lot? Did the fabric grow during washing? Nobody knows the answer to these questions, but experienced makers know where to begin looking. And that's something I've been thinking about lately, because whether we're talking about knitting, sewing, spinning, yarn dyeing, pottery, woodworking, baking, gardening, what have you, the most valuable skill might not be in the craft itself. It might be in the ability to figure out why something happened. Hello, and welcome to the Wool Needles Hands podcast, a podcast about making things, asking questions, and following the thread. My name is Taylor, and I will be your host. And that was new. That was a new intro. I think most of us have a picture in our mind of what an experienced maker looks like. They're a person who can knit an entire sweater without mistakes. The person who never seems to rip back. In other words, we tend to look at experience as the absence of mistakes. The longer I've spent around makers of all kinds, the less convinced I am that this is actually true. Because the experienced knitters, dyers, woodworkers, bakers, potters, ceramists, sewists don't seem to make dramatically fewer mistakes. They simply respond to them differently. When we're new to something, unexpected outcomes often feel kind of personal. The sweater doesn't fit, the yarn pills, the stitch pattern looks strange, or maybe the color is just not what we expected. And because we're still learning, it's very easy to interpret those as a reflection of ourselves. Maybe I'm just bad at this, or maybe I did something wrong. I'm simply not cut out for this. But watch an experienced maker encounter a problem, and you'll often notice something completely different. They don't immediately judge themselves, they become curious. Interesting. Why did that happen? That's curiosity. That question changes everything. You see, the moment curiosity enters the room, shame leaves it. We're no longer deciding whether we're good or bad at something. We're gathering evidence, investigating, learning. And it's that sort of thing, that sort of chain of thought that had me wondering if troubleshooting, or being able to troubleshoot, is actually one of the defining characteristics of an experienced maker. And it's not because they know every answer or have all the right moves, but rather that they know how to begin asking the right questions. Or at least know that asking questions is the next right move. Now, to be clear, I don't believe that troubleshooting somehow replaces experience or mastery. That knowledge matters. In fact, that knowledge is exactly what makes troubleshooting possible. The more experience we gain, the more possibilities we can recognize. Spinners will notice things about plying and twist that more novice yarn spinners or even fiber artists might not consider. A dyer can understand how color can behave in a skein of yarn. A garment maker might notice something about construction and fit that just a novice or beginner knitter might not understand when it comes to piecing together a garment. A weaver might notice something about structure, and that craft knowledge gives us the vocabulary, and troubleshooting is what allows us to use the vocabulary. It's the process of taking something we know and applying it to something that we don't yet understand. And what's interesting is how that process looks remarkably similar across all manner of craft. Observe, ask questions, gather clues, form a theory, test the theory, observe again. That's not just crafting, that's the scientific method wearing a hand knit cardigan. One of the things I think is most fascinating about maker communities is that no two people see a problem exactly the same way. Recently, I watched a knitting question unfold over on the Patreon. Someone shared a project and asked for help understanding something that they were noticing in the fabric. And it was pretty quickly that folks began offering theories. Some looked at the yarn, some looked at the construction, some focused on tension, and others focused on fiber characteristics. When I first noticed the problem, I found myself looking at it through the lens of a yarn dyer because the yarn in question was variegated in color, and color seemed to have something to do with part of the issue. And I was curious about the color behavior. I wanted to see the yarn itself, the actual cake or skein of yarn. I wanted to see the way that dye pooled in the different spaces of the skein, how the color was coming across, how many colors were present, and how frequently they changed. But someone else brought a completely different perspective. They had a lot of experience with spinning and plying, and they brought up tension and how they thought that that might be at play in what this person was noticing in their project. And that observation, as well as my own curiosity with my own theory, led me to do some interesting testing. You can see my weird swatch in this photo right here. In fact, it's now lovingly hanging right here on my wall. And as I continued testing this, I started seeing where the truth was coming, in which theory we were finding more answers, or where I thought the answer was most likely to develop. And that was a really fascinating process to me. And it wasn't necessarily fascinating because we figured out who it was that was correct. Because the funny thing is we're not really sure who's correct or what the actual answer is to the conundrum. We have better observations, better theories, better questions to ask for further analysis, but certainty, not necessarily. And that is what makes the whole thing even more fascinating to me. We were watching a group of people learn how to think about a problem. The dyer saw one thing, the spinner saw something else, the person who just knits saw something else. Nobody had the complete picture, but together we were able to understand far more than any one of us could alone without a lot of extensive trial and error. Knowledge isn't or shouldn't be concentrated in one person. It's distributed among many, and that's probably a rabbit hole for another day. I want to take a minute from the video to remind you that I am also the owner and dyer of Fiber for the People yarn, based out of my home here in Southern Nevada. Most of the yarn that I dye and sell in my shop is regionally local from Northern Nevada. It is a merino rambouillet sport weight yarn, and it's absolutely gorgeous. However, I do bring in and rotate in lots of other gorgeous natural yarn bases. If you love small batch hand dyed yarn with colorways connected to stories and really fun inspiration, definitely check it out over at fiberforthepeople.com, and don't forget to sign up for the newsletter so you can be kept in the loop about all future shop updates. Okay, back to the show. The more I was thinking about this, the more I started to wonder if troubleshooting things like this used to be more visible a long time ago, way in the past. In our history, people were much more open about the process of troubleshooting and about how closely that was connected to the maker existence in general, to craft. And it wasn't necessarily because people were encountering more problems. I think it was because people were more familiar with witnessing the process behind a craft. I mean, most of human history, people couldn't just instantly search for the answers to their problems and see somebody fix in real time the same problem they were having and then just essentially replicate that process. There wasn't a tutorial waiting to explain what happened. There was observation, experimentation, and conversation. And that last one is a really big one. Trial and error. Learning wasn't simply the process of receiving information, it was the process of discovering it. And because of that, troubleshooting wasn't a separate skill. It wasn't relegated to some kind of section in the back of a instructional guide like we get when you buy a new vacuum cleaner or something like that. It was part of the process of being a maker. Now, of course, nobody's asking you to make the vacuum from the ground up, so it's a little bit of a different experience, but troubleshooting always seems to be kind of relegated to its own separate section. Like, if everything doesn't work out perfectly for you as we expect it should based on our stellar instructions, here's what you can do if some mistakes pop up. And you're lucky if your particular mistake, as nuanced as it might be, really shows up in that troubleshooting guide. You can't rely on that. Troubleshooting is the craft. Today, I think many of us approach learning with a very understandable expectation. We read the pattern, we watch the tutorial, we follow the instructions, and hopefully arrive at the result without having to access the troubleshooting page at the back of the manual. But eventually, every maker encounters the same reality. Your yarn is different. Your hands are different. Climate is different. Your body is different. So many factors play into how a project is going to go down. And sooner or later, the instructions run out. And at that point, something interesting starts to happen. The project starts asking questions that the pattern never anticipated. Questions that don't necessarily even show up in the packaged troubleshooting pages at the end of the manual. And that's where your ability to troubleshoot begins. It's not failure, it's participation. You've reached the end of what can be prescribed, and now the project is asking something of you. Now observation matters. Now judgment matters. Now experience begins to accumulate. Now you're learning in the same way makers have been learning for generations. And perhaps that's why I find troubleshooting so beautiful. It's one of the few places where uncertainty becomes productive. We stop worrying about being right and start trying to understand. And understanding has a way of leading us somewhere useful. When it comes to the making world and being a creator, a maker of things, honestly, I think that being curious and having a fresh and renewed sense of curiosity and really exercising that sense is one of the most important things that you can do and maintain. To see information where you once saw failure, to ask questions where you were once more inclined to assign blame, to understand and accept that every unexpected outcome is trying to teach you something. And I think that that's what experienced makers are really collecting over the years. Not perfect projects, just better questions. If you'd like to see the actual discussion that inspired this video, you can find that over on the Patreon now. It is the two-part video series where I address a question from a patron with my own theories and some testing that I do, creating that really quirky loincloth balaclava situation going on. It's a fantastic way to help support the channel here on YouTube, allowing me to provide free content right here. You can find all of that plus more over on the Patreon. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of your day with me. Until next time, happy making, happy knitting, happy whatever it is that you're doing. Take care, be well, and I will see you soon. Bye.